ahead and bring the July 6, 2023 Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Clay Thomas,
Here.
Don Christensen,
Here.
Rob Pierce,
Here.
Peter Gishon,
Here.
Kathy Julian.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. If we'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Julian, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Pelham, would you do the ethics law announcement, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, standing in just for a moment for our district attorney. Board members are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the board today, 1, you have received a gift or loan. 2, you have a pecuniary interest. 3, you have a commitment in a private capacity such as family, employment, business, or similar relationship. Or 4, you provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered. You must disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And you must furthermore abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it is clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Board of Adjustment rules, if you have had any contact outside of this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the board today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting.
Thank you very much. And the very next one is the appeal procedure, and we'll throw it back to you, Mr. Pelham.
Certainly, appeal procedure. Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and qualify as an aggrieved person or party, you may appeal in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and application fee.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is public comment. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the agenda. However, action may not be taken on any matter raised during the public comment period until the matter is specifically listed on the agenda as an action item. Comments are to be made to the Board of Adjustment as a whole. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone wishing to speak at this time?
I have no public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you very much. Next item is approval of the July 6, 2023 agenda. Before we do that, I'd just like to make a note that we will be, item number 8 will be removed as Mr. Stanley is unavailable to attend today. So that will be an adjustment in the agenda. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Rob, so moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next is the approval of the June 1st, 2023 draft minutes. Is there any discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll again entertain a motion.
This is Rob, so moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up, public hearing items. First item is special use permit case number WSUP 22-0027, the Ophir Hill grading. And I believe we have Mr. Bronschek as addressing this issue for us.
Good afternoon. Chris Bronzik, Washoe County Planning. We're looking at WSUP 22-0027. This is the Ophir Hill major grading. So I want to start this off by providing a little note. So with this request, with this special use permit that's before you, staff is not asking the board to authorize the existing illegal aggregate use that has taken place on this site. Instead, what we're looking at is a grading request that will result in the termination of that use, the restoration of the subject parcels to accommodate future legal residential use types. And so that's what the emphasis of this SUP is. So as mentioned, this is a major grading request before you. The applicant has stated within their earthwork summary that this is going to result in 22,050 cubic yards of cut, 16,750 cubic yards of fill, with an additional export of roughly 5,500 cubic yards of rock and other earthen material that are currently existing within stockpiles on site. So the primary result of this is to create residential building pads, driveways, and all around restore the areas outside of the building pad areas associated with this grading. Additionally, with this request, they will be restoring land to the south, which is roughly 0.82 acres, and it is located on BLM property. This specific, the property owner's specific parcels as part of this request total 11.29 acres, and their APN 046, 032, 02, 04, and 05. There are three trifecta, basically, of connected properties. It should be noted that BLM did submit a signed affidavit as part of this request. They submitted a signed affidavit back in September when the original request came in, and they wanted to be party to this amended request from February. This BLM parcel will be regraded and revegetated as part of this project. So the project submitted before us comes in a phased approach. So the applicant provided a two-phased proposal. The first phase is specific to the removal of those stockpiles. So the 5,500 cubic yards of material to be exported off. This material will be exported to a property owned by the applicant in Mound House, Nevada. And there will be storage on an adjacent site owned by, or leased by another group that is zoned to allow this. Again, though, this will be taking place in a different county. This involves also removing any sort of equipment that is on site. This does not include or incorporate any additional cuts or actual grading beyond the export. So as part of this phase, the applicant volunteered to staff roughly 4 months to get this completed. Staff looked at that, understood that there potentially is going to be some technical issues associated with it, whether it be weather or meeting some of the conditions associated with it. The county felt that we should give them a little bit additional time, so we provided a 6-month time frame, a 6-month window to complete phase 1. So this is a really busy slide, and this is intended to show a rough outline of where all the existing stockpiles are on site. And so this is all part of that phase 1 removal. That red line, that thick red line towards the bottom is the property line that the applicants own, and to the south of it is BLM property. As you can see, there are existing stockpiles on the BLM property, which this clarifies a little more on where where this impact on BLM land takes place. As mentioned with the phasing, phase 2 is that grading of building pads, the roadway, installation of utilities, paving, and the complete restoration of all BLM land. The applicants volunteered a 6-month timeframe to complete Phase 2. Again, taking into account the record winter we just had, as well as any potential technical issues, the county has provided the applicant 12 months to complete Phase 2. This totals roughly 1 year, 6 months to complete both phases for this request. This is a rough site plan of what the end goal will be with the completed grading, the building pads, as well as drainage. So the applicants held 2 neighborhood meetings as part of this request. The first was in August 8th, 2022. Within this time frame, there was concerns related to roadway safety, house positioning for the future parcel map, setbacks, and legal access. The second neighborhood meeting was held on February 20th of this year. 2 citizens were present at that neighborhood meeting, and the primary concerns were related to the rock piles, if those rock piles would remain on site, and trees along Highway 395, as well as the project timeline. So 39 property owners were noticed, unique property owners. 48 total parcels were in this notice area, and the notice distance was roughly 2,000 feet. So with this request, staff did meet with the applicants to discuss amending certain conditions. And so one of the conditions is currently within Exhibit A of your conditions of approval. This is related to the financial assurance or the bonding. That original language that's found in your staff report contains language such as bonds, which Washoe County Planning does not accept bonds. So this is meant to address that language option, as well as requiring the applicant to meet this condition within 60 days of the date of approval, if approval is granted. SAP's also recommending 2 new conditions. So the first condition is the applicant shall submit sufficient documentation from BLM to Washoe County Planning and Engineering for restoration of the BLM parcel. And this should be done prior to the issuance of any building and grading permits associated with Phase 2 of the grading. Additionally, this is a standard condition for revegetation, and this is requiring all disturbed areas to be revegetated with irrigation for a period of not less than 3 years and for as long as necessary until vegetation in the previously disturbed areas is at least 70% of the density. And this also will require that financial assurance in an amount equal to 120%. Standard language, but this is to ensure that not only the property itself has some revegetation, but also the adjacent BLM. Similarly, in working with our engineering division, they doubled up on the one condition related to the financial assurances. This is the same condition from the previous slide, but it is an amended condition for engineering's conditions of approval. So I want to talk about the financial assurance just a little bit. So as noted, Washoe County Planning does not accept bonds. What we do accept is cash, money order checks, cashier checks, certificate of deposits, escrow accounts, and irrevocable trust accounts. And so I want to make sure it's clear and on the record that this is real money. This isn't something where bonds where you pay a certain amount and it covers the whole thing. This is actual hard cash that's going into this financial assurance. So there is findings. The standard findings are consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effects on a military installation. There's also 2 specific findings related to the South Valley's area plan that were required to be made. The first is that the community character, as described in the character statement, can be adequately concerned through mitigation. And the second is that no significant degradation of air quality will occur as part of this permit. Staff is able to make all of these findings and is recommending approval with conditions. I've provided a possible motion up front, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Could we go back over the condition regarding the revegetation and how that relates, if at all, to the BLM property?
So it's a standard condition, but it enforces the requirement for revegetation as well as enforcing the requirement of irrigation.
For the land that is in the subdivision area, okay. And the condition, the point I, just relates to providing information
Correct.
about. Okay.
The documentation that BLM is okay for them to move forward with the revegetation efforts on their property.
Okay, and those revegetation efforts, have they been detailed in a document, in Appendix A? Is that?
The only thing that's in Appendix A is the seed mixture that BLM provided
Okay.
as part of the application.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, just for my own edification, if I understand some of this correctly, back in 2016, code enforcement was notified and took action. And that same year, the applicant came forward with a SUP, basically to correct what needed to be done through via code enforcement inspections. And they were granted a 4-year window to get that done, which would have brought them to 2021. And then on page 6 of your documentation, there were 2 issues that they had to comply with, and they had dates of March 1st, 2021. If I understand that correctly, that did not occur then?
I'm sorry, what page on the staff report?
Page 6 of your staff report, under where it's,
I see it.
you have item 1 and item 2, and it says special use permit had conditions. They were intended strictly to enforce the timelines. And then it has 1 and 2, and they were supposed to be no later than March 2021. And am I assuming correctly
is-
that they did not comply with that?
That was not complied with. However, what took place towards the end of that SUP, that special use permit that was approved in 2016, the applicant or the property owner at that time submitted for a parcel map. That parcel map carried over a number of the conditions of approval from the special use permit in 2016 to almost act as like an extension to allow them to complete the grading work that was done. The applicants submitted grading plans in September of last year to try and conform to those. But staff felt that there was amendments that were required to move forward. And so that is why, instead of hearing this item 8 months ago, you're hearing it today.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Julian?
And in the meantime, there was a stop order issued, correct?
That is correct.
When the letter dated, when someone attested to no change in the property's appearance over the past 2 years, in terms of getting things done.
So we had our code enforcement officer issued a stop action order in last year. I did reach out to him today just to confirm that there's been no major movement on this property since that stop activity order was placed. It was relayed to me that per their review, they have not seen any major activity taking place since then. But because there's been no code enforcement activity on this, it hasn't been strongly pursued.
And Chris, just one other point I just want to make sure I'm clear on is you showed the map which showed the property lines of where BLM land was versus where the property owners was, and that we have dumping on BLM land. So that would indicate that we had illegal dumping on BLM then, is that correct?
No, not illegal dumping. Can we put the presentation back up real quick?
Were they authorized to move that fill onto BLM land?
My understanding is there was no authorization to be able to utilize that land, but that land was not being used. I don't want to say dumping. It was basically a storage area. It could be construed as dumping, but it was material from their operation that was being stored on site. But my understanding is there was no authorization granted.
A follow-up to that, and material from the operation would comprise boulders, rocks, fill, whatever they use for their business, correct?
That is my understanding.
And there's an active tentative map now?
They have submitted a tentative parcel map that was reviewed concurrently with this application. That tentative parcel map will be heard at the Parcel Map Review Committee next Thursday.
Okay.
Are there any more questions for staff? Mr. Christensen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, this might be a question better suited to the applicant, but when this debris was deposited by Mother Nature back in '83, and I understand it was catastrophic, did the Burdicks own that piece of property, or did they buy it after that event?
That is going to be a question for the applicants.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Does the applicant present wish to speak on this matter? Or their representative?
Thank you, Chair Thomas. Board members, John Krumpadik. I'm representing the applicant, Linda Burdick, Burdick Excavating Company. She's with me in the audience this afternoon. Also with me is Ed Thomas, our civil engineer. I'll be glad to touch on, I know you guys had a lot of questions for staff on the history of this. I'm not involved. I will never duck any questions you have. I'm only familiar with what went on the last 12 to 18 months in this process. So if we need to engage the applicant for that history, I'd be glad to do so. With regard to my PowerPoint, staff touched on a lot of it, so I'll zoom through some of it. The SUP is for removal of the excess rock being transported to the other facility as discussed for a closed excavation company. All operations have been terminated. And then restoring the site while in addition preparing it for the 4-lot subdivision that was approved several years ago. The project, when I say project, and bear with me here because typically we do a subdivision map with a use permit. In this case, we've got a parcel map that goes separate to the Parcel Map Review Committee in the SUP, but I'm addressing that on a global basis. There's a 4-lot subdivision with a shared new roadway and the elevated building pads, the driveways for each lot, and then associated drainage, which includes the culverts and a stormwater basin. I would note in the third bullet point, in 2021, Parcel Map Review Committee approved the 4-lot parcel map, which is now expired as expressed by staff, with conditions that required grading for the lots. Meeting that condition is the subject, part of the subject of this special use permit. And then, as I mentioned, we are concurrently processing a new parcel map. In terms of community outreach, we did have 2 meetings, again, as staff noted, one in February 5 months ago or just less than, and another one a year ago in August. I wanted to also note that legal findings are, of course, key to this process. We agree with staff in making the 4 legal findings. Number 1 is consistency with the master plan and the South Valleys area plan. Number 2 is improvements. That is providing adequate public facilities, either existing or planned. Number 3 is site suitability. The site has to be proven physically suitable for the development. And number 4 is the issue it's not detrimental, meaning it is not injurious to the public health, safety, or welfare, this property or adjacent properties, or a detriment to the character of the area. There's the site with a bit of surroundings. You can see abutting Old Highway 395, and then east is I-580, and some of the more common roads to the north. Overhill Road used to be the old access. I'll show you an exhibit that touches on that. There's just the notice the neighborhood meeting, the last one we had in February 20 of this year. Same map that staff touched on, 48 parcels. 3 people attended, staff said 2. There was actually a couple, but they each had their own comments on the project, so the couple and then additional households. So 2 households, 3 people attended. And the questions, comments were about when are the rock piles going to be removed? Will the trees along the highway remain? And then the third one was the timeline for removal. We'd expressed our best response to them at the time. It was well received, and we moved on. Nice to see photos about what we're really talking about when we're looking at all these site plans in aerial view. A couple of things. This obviously shows the mounds of rocks that are part of the excavation operation. Those will be removed. That's that part of that 5,500 yards of which staff mentioned in their graph or in their table. And then way back, you can see the significance of the trees. Those are major evergreen trees that will stay, and I'll show them in a plan view exhibit of those. There's another bunch to the left of the photo that are not quite as impressive, but still going to be maintained in the plan for development. There's an exhibit similar like staff had. They had one with the more refined circles and ellipses and all that stuff, and we got bubbles here. But you can see what's going on. The idea is the mounds of material to be removed. Those bubbly lines are where we have the significant tree bunches of trees, and those are going to remain. And then we've sort of plotted where preferred house locations are. You can see the one on the northeast is preferred because it's a nice enclave that's surrounded by mature evergreen trees. Similarly, the one to the southeast, preferred house location, because we have that Quonset hut, that's a investment this property owner made. We're trying to keep it in this process, and it adds an amenity to one of those parcels. Then you can see the mature trees we talked about to the south. And I think that pretty much covers it. There is the exhibit that shows, now you can see the inventory of trees that show up on this illustrative. Again, northeast corner where I mentioned that new house would go. There's a lot of tree growth there. There's a real value. I mean, we're talking about 20-year-old trees that we're trying to save. We've got a lot of real estate to work with, so it's a pretty simple site planning opportunity of a building envelope. And then similarly on the south, as I mentioned, the southeast, the trees you can see them along the highway. Those will be preserved as well. The relocated access next to that residence that's been involved in this process all along on the north property, shared property line. And then I note the old Ophir Hill Road as the prior access that will be closed off. I just wanted to show you the old parcel map. That's when it was 3 parcels. You can see the little outline in blue was the legal access to this property at that time. Zoning is, of course, 1 per 2.5 allows 4 lots, which is being proposed with the parcel map. And that's all I have. I'd be glad to take any questions. As I mentioned, Ed Thomas is our senior civil engineer with Loomis, also present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kaponick. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Ms. Julian?
Can you confirm that that you do intend to do 72 trees with 1 tree per 20 linear feet along the north and south
Yes.
buffer and 1 tree per 50 linear?
Yes, we've accepted all of the conditions. There are 32 plus the additional ones that
Okay.
Chris mentioned, negotiated this week.
All right, so
Yeah.
if this were made explicit as a condition in the list, would the applicant be averse to that?
Which,
If it were made explicit and worded as it is worded in the staff report,
On
would
the
that be
trees?
satisfactory with you?
yes, we'll accept the condition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for this gentleman?
The parcel map will be exactly the same as the one that expired, effectively?
Not exact, but yes, to look at it side by side, basically the same.
And utilities, it's domestic well and septic?
That's correct.
Any further questions? Mr. Christensen.
Is this the appropriate time to ask the ownership? Or do we need to speak to the verdicts about that?
About which?
About when they acquired this property?
Okay, I don't know that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Did you hear that, sir? 1998.
I did not hear that, no.
1998.
In the slide with me.
Oh, okay. So
1983.
they purchased it subsequent to the catastrophic event?
That's right, 1981, yeah.
Okay. Then my question then for you as the consultant here, given the performance of prior special use permit or non-performance, what's our assurance that this is going to move forward? Or are we going to, as a board, in the case of a non-compliance, are we going to yell, oh, stop, or I'll yell stop again? We don't have a lot of force in law, but the performance has been abysmal. And I'm not convinced that this is going to be anything more than just an exercise and more time.
I am 100% convinced. I hope you can appreciate it. In my discussions with Linda Burdick, I've spent a lot of time with her. I believe everything she's told me. I don't know it to be true until she executes. I don't know that past. I think there is no doubt there's some confusion on her end. I mean, she asks me if we're ready to get a grading permit after this hearing. She's a very smart woman. This process is so obscure to people that don't live it every day. And you don't, some of the steps are just not really apparent. I'm not making any excuses for her not reading the conditions from the past and something slipped through. I don't think it was I don't believe it was a intended disobedient thing on her part. I don't know. You could ask her. I'm just telling you that I believe she's firmly committed. I've talked to her husband about it. They've owned this, you've heard how long they own the property, how long they've had their operation there. And I just feel and see a lot of commitment on their part to execute. They're making quite an investment here. And that's what I know about Linda Burdick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
So how does this fiscal security work and the timing actually operate? You post fiscal security, then you get the permit? And if you don't within the 60-day period, then
45 days on the revegetation part in the first piece, so that's right, then the county pulls the bond and
Yeah.
they execute, right? So there is a bond, the staff talked about it more, I'm not gonna get into the bonding, but yeah, there's a financial assurance, right? That if she didn't perform, there is a provision in a condition to act upon by the county.
and that fiscal security has to be posted within 45 or 60 days?
That's right, 45.
45?
Did
That's
I
our
have that right,
assurance.
Chris? Okay, act within 45 days.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Pelham, please.
Thank you very much. The financial, I'm sorry, Roger Pelham, with Washoe County Planning. The financial assurances must be received by Washoe County before we will issue any permits. They have no authorization to do any work of any kind until after acceptable financial assurances are provided. There is then a separate process that I think everyone can agree we hope never occurs, in which the county then uses that to do certain work there. And what I would point out is the work that Washoe County would do is not the grading necessary for the 4 home sites and all those good things, but rather simply to put this back to as close to original contour as possible and to revegetate, to essentially undo the previously unpermitted grading.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Further questions? Ms. Julian?
Yes, I think I do. Let's assume, because of the poor performance in the past, that this doesn't happen. What then, the financial assurance does not, though, cover the BLM land, correct?
So the financial, Chris Brunswick, Washoe County Planning. So the financial assurance condition specifically covers all properties. So not only the 3 properties owned by the property owner, it also covers the required revegetation and grading for the 0.082 acres or 0.82 acres of BLM.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Ms. Grisham.
Just one more follow-up. Have we seen a cost estimate? Do we know the dollar value of the financial security?
We do not yet.
Any further questions for the applicant's representative? Seeing none? Thank you. Thank you, Chris, also. With that, Madam Secretary, is there any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you very much. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there discussion on this item? Ms. Julian.
I'm prepared to support this, provided there are 2 explicit conditions added. The first would be to explicitly state the number of trees to be added as per the paragraph on page 8 of the staff report, which talks about 72 trees along the north and south and 1 tree per 50 linear feet along the highway frontage, as long as that is made specific. And then a second condition which simply states that they agree to adhere to the BLM agreement, so that we have that explicitly referenced in our conditions, that linkage to BLM. I understand Washoe County as staffing cannot put that in, but the board, I understand from legal, can offer that up as a condition. And again, I wouldn't be saying this unless we had seen 30 years of essentially operating in an unpermitted manner, and the more recent lack of performance. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe BLM is in favor of this. I believe they've been involved. Chris, can you just clarify that? Is that a true statement? I believe they're aware of this and they've been actively involved in this.
They've been, they did submit that signed affidavit to be part of this. They do want to see their property brought back up to standards, but I haven't received anything specific beyond that.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion on the board? Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. For the record, Don Christensen. And my question about the ownership and the time frame there. I, as a board member here, would be extremely kind and lenient about the time frames that were violated in previous actions by this board and by our expectations, should we grant this special use permit, that it would be performed, and then realize that I'm getting into an area that's probably not our baby exclusively. However, staff has put conditions on this thing, very stringent, very strict. I'm not going to quote it here, but I think there's got to be a way to reinforce the seriousness of this rock pile that's been here since 1983. And I would be very sympathetic had this been the original owner trying to remediate their problem. But this was a profit-making operation by an excavation rock company, and it goes on. And I'm just not real convinced this enough for me to support it, that this is going to happen. This is not the time that I think, as a developer, I would be developing land use for building. We're in kind of a slump right now. But again, we're getting to an area that is probably not entirely appropriate for us. But I just don't like this project. It's been going on way too long, and I don't know. I don't like it on its merits.
Thank you. Additional discussion? I have, Mr. Pelham, maybe you can help me out on this. Two things. I believe by conditioning the financial conditions, that helps to hold the individual accountable to ensure that, in fact, they do comply with our conditions. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, I think that's fair. And I guess sort of how I would address what has been expressed as perhaps a lack of confidence that this is going to go forward in the manner as conditioned. I think a reasonable person can have those doubts. We as staff really don't look at that. That's outside of what we look at. But what we do look at is how can we ensure that there is some reasonable expectation that this is going to go forward in the manner as outlined. And I think that the financial assurances are really sort of our only method of doing that. One of the things that I think helps to create that confidence is that this is real money. This is cash. Now, we don't know how much this is going to be, but we do have a professional engineer representing the applicant. He's here in the chambers, and I don't think it would be unreasonable to ask if he can give us just a ballpark. He's obviously not going to be able to give us down to the $1 or even perhaps $1,000, but perhaps he can give us a ballpark. And that's not going to be a trivial sum. This is a lot of work that needs to be done. And that engineer's estimate is not only going to be for that exact amount, there's actually going to be a contingency just in case things go wrong, because something goes wrong in everything. There's always a little more to do than you would anticipate at the beginning. So, and again, this is real money on deposit, for lack of a better term. If that does not give you confidence, there's very little else that we as staff can offer.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Michael Large from the District Attorney's Office. I want to caution this board in regard to this. The board's purview on these is to make the findings on the SUP, whether or not you can make those findings. One of those findings is not whether the board subjectively believes this project's actually going to get done. We are bound by county code and the legal requirements that we have in county code to ensure, to the best of our ability, that it does get done. And that comes along with our planners and our code enforcement. This board's role in the purview is to whether or not the findings can be made under county code for the issuance of the SUP for major grading. Not to anticipate what may happen in terms of economic conditions, what may happen in regard to the financial viability of the project. That's outside this board's scope.
Mr. Large, thank you for that. I have one more question for Mr. Pelham on this, though. and I guess it's kind of an open-ended question, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if we don't approve it, then what? We have an issue, we have a problem out there, we have an applicant that says they want to correct the problem, they want to move forward to go ahead and take care of it. If we don't approve this, what happens after that? Is this just stay in perpetuity as an unfinished project? Mr. Pelham, can you help the board out on that with an answer?
Thank you for a very simple question, Clay, because it is the exact opposite. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
No,
This is a very difficult and complicated question, and what it really comes down to is if this special use permit is denied, then we fall back into code enforcement, and it's a bit of a loop, I'm afraid, because the method by which the applicant can come into compliance with the code is to obtain a special use permit for major grading. If that gets denied, then frankly, we're in a bit of a loop, and they would probably be coming back with another application for another special use permit, perhaps with a different set of configurations or a different set of characteristics. I should say, the first thing that would probably happen is that would be appealed, and this would go to the Board of County Commissioners, and they might agree with your decision. Of course, they may disagree with your decision. So that would really be the next step in the process. But assuming that this decision held, we are in a difficult enforcement position. I really kind of wish Planning Manager Chad Giesinger were here, because he could probably address it far better than I, but it would basically fall back into the purview of code enforcement.
Mr. Pelham, thank you for taking a very difficult question and simplifying it for the board.
Best I can, sir.
Thank you. No, ma'am, you cannot. This is closed at this point in time to just the board members. Is there any other further discussion from the board?
Well, if I might just add in support of my suggestion that those 2 additional conditions be added, we already heard from the neighborhood meeting that they were concerned about the landscaping. So I think having a specific condition that addresses that helps the communication with the public and the community, which I'm all in favor of. And secondly, I just think that they've already agreed to what the BLM wants to the BLM. I think it's completely appropriate to cross-reference that in our conditions. And I'm willing to support that if we do that.
Thank you, Ms. Julian. I agree. If when a motion is made would be the time to add those additional conditions. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Okay. I will need some help from Kathy Julian. For the record, I will need some help, I think, from legal so that I can word this appropriately. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 220027 for Burdick Excavating with the conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, including 2 additional conditions, the first of which is the applicant plant 72 trees with 1 tree per 20 linear feet along the north and south buffer and 1 tree per 50 linear feet along the highway frontage. And that any trees on site with greater than 6-inch diameter at breast height will be preserved. The second condition being that the applicant adheres to the agreement with the Bureau of Land Management to regrade and restore the 0.825 acre portion of the property adjacent to the subject.
May I ask a
Thank you.
question?
Ms. Julian, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. See.
What?
Would your motion include the additional conditions as noted by the planner during his presentation?
I believe this motion referenced the,
Those were the two?
the information in the hearing, which this is the hearing, right? Is that true?
I just want to make sure that the two additional conditions as well as the revised condition. And so I just didn't hear the word revised.
Okay. With conditions as Exhibit A to this matter, including exactly what I said before, and the two conditions presented by county planner and the revised condition, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and the South Valley's Area Plan Policy SV.2.16 and SV.18.3, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effect on military installation.
Well done, Ms. Julian. Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Grisham. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is special use permit case number WSUP 22-0028, Summit Church Tower. And we have Ms.
This is Rob. I have a disclosure on that.
Yes.
I know the property owner, but I do not know the applicant, and it will not affect my judgment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Large. Any?
Mr. Pierce already consulted with legal, and I agree with his analysis.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Olander, floor is yours.
Good evening, Board. This is Julie Olander with Planning and Building. So we have a special use permit for a wireless tower. It's going to be 58 feet high. It's going to be a stealth tower. It's going to be disguised as a windmill. And they're also requesting to vary the landscaping and parking requirements by not requiring any additional landscaping or requiring a paved parking spot. The site's located out of Pyramid Road. Some of you might be familiar with it. On the left is sort of an overview, and then on the right is sort of a closed-in vision, closer vision view of it. And I should have labeled where the tower is going to go. It's going to go in that upper left-hand corner. And here's a better, excuse me, a better view showing where the tower is going to be proposed. There's a tower down in the southern portion of the property, and that will remain. However, the equipment down there will be removed. And here's a site plan of the tower itself, and you can see the triangle shape is where the tower is, and then you have the equipment surrounding the tower area. And it will be enclosed by the enclosure is 30 feet by 17 feet. That's 510 square feet. And it'll be enclosed by fence, and that will be CMU blocks, and they'll be painted as a desert color. And then they will also help keep the public and wildlife out of the area. Here's a view of the windmill. And here's a photo simulation of the no windmill at the top, and then you can see the windmill in the photo on the lower portion of the screen. And here's another one. It's a little harder to see in this one in this light, but you can sort of see outline of where the tower is in that lower photo. As I said, it's a stealth tower, and they're proposed to put it at the Summit Christian Church, which is a 36-acre site. There's no other development close by where the tower is going to be located, and the area is fairly steep with no vegetation. The parcel has a master plan designation of open space and a regulatory zoning of public, semi-public facility, and the allowed height is 65 feet, and the tower is going to be 58 feet. The parcels to the south and east have a master plan designation of suburban residential and regulatory zoning of medium-density suburban. The parcel to the west and north is a 456-acre vacant parcel, and that's owned by the federal government. And it's zoned an open, master plan open space. The communication facility is considered a commercial use within Washoe County code and requires 20% of the parcel to be landscape that's disturbed. However, the applicant is asking to waive that landscaping requirement because of the location. There's no trees there, and there's no way to irrigate the vegetation properly. They're also asking to waive the one paved parking place required. This is going to be an unmanned site, so people will just go to it as needed. So again, that's not really a needed element of this development. And I just want to remind you that the Board of Adjustment has that power to waive those two items. The applicant held a neighborhood meeting on March 30th at the East Washoe Valley Community Center, and there were 2 people attending it. The applicant gave a brief presentation, and there were any significant questions they asked about where the tower is going to be located and what the tower is going to be looked at. And they didn't have any real issues with the proposal. Here's a map of the areas that were noticed for the tower. We are required to notice 500 feet from the site. 138 notices were sent out, and I did not receive any emails or phone calls. Various departments have reviewed this application, and if they had conditions, they're included in your conditions of approval, and staff is able to make all the findings. And I provide a possible motion if, when you're ready. The applicant is available on the phone if you have any question for them, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Olander. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Christian.
Can you describe access to the site?
I should, maybe I'll go back here. So, oops. There's a roadway that goes up. It's not showing on the site plan. See the roadway, you can sort of see it. It's hard to see because they've drawn a line on it, but on the left-hand side, there's a road that goes all the way up from the church parking lot up sort of where the existing tower is, and then it goes north along up to where the proposed tower is.
Planner Olander, you have a laser pointer if you wanted to use that to show you.
I'm sorry, yeah. Did you catch that?
I did. So there is existing gravel access?
That will be included in the development of the site.
Okay. And how often do these things need to be maintained?
I'm not sure. The applicant is online, so they probably could explain that better than I can. I don't think so. It's sort of somewhat as needed, and but I believe they come out like every 3 to 6 months.
Thank you.
This is Rob. I have a question. The access to that area, is that gated and locked?
Yes, you can't tell, but it's gated. I drove out there, and it's gated right there off of the road that is for the church.
Okay,
And
so-
that area is paved. So the church parking lot and that drive around the church, maybe this other picture will show it better.
So the general public will not be able to access this?
Right, you can sort of see where the pavement is located by the church, and then the dirt road goes up. And, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen?
For the record, Don Christensen. I noticed in the illustration, the photo rendition, that this top of the windmill, if you will, exceeds the height, the crest of the mountain behind, as viewed from the highway. I do appreciate the fact that neighbors did not, they're very clear that it does exceed that visual height. So in regards to site suitability, I have a little bit of heartburn here. Are there other existing windmill-type towers, if you will, in Washoe County that you know of?
Julia Lander for the record. I am not aware of any. Maybe Mr. Pelham is aware of any. This is my first windmill.
For the record, Roger Pilling, Webster County Planning. I'm not aware of any other windmills, other things that have been sort of stealth designs that have been constructed over the years, clock tower, flagpole. But no, I'm not aware of any other trees. Yeah, lots of trees, mono pines or mono palms, but I'm not aware of any other windmills.
Again, I'm not totally opposed to it. It seems kind of silly, actually, but inasmuch as the neighbors don't seem to object, I think you've kind of satisfied my curiosity in them. I have a little knowledge of the signal propagation of a radio signal, and higher the better. I'm thinking out loud, so thank you for taking that time. But yeah, I see no other way around than what they presented here, and it's certainly a reliable, responsible company, and the church doesn't object to having that on their property. I guess it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Julie, this is Rob for the record. Is there any possibility that that picture showing that taller than the mountain range behind it might be an optical illusion?
Yeah, I'll go to the next one. So there you can't really, it's hard to tell there, but that one, so it is sort of an angle thing, and I could ask the applicant if they wanted to respond to that question. But in this fish photo, you see it sort of blends in with the hillside. And I'm not quite, I would agree with you, Mr. Pierce, that I think that this might be not correct, because I drove out to the site and I did not get the impression that it was higher than the hillside. So
Yeah.
that would be a call maybe for the applicant, or this other shows that it's sort of hidden by the hillside.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate that. Is the applicant present and wish to speak on this matter?
We do have the applicant.
Hi, my name is Lisa, and I am the applicant for Crown Castle and T-Mobile. And the view that I have, it appears that it is not taller than the mountain. And then to answer your question about the maintenance, Julie is right. It's about every 3 to 6 months.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close that. We'll open it up to public comment. Madam Secretary, is there any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
Thank you very much. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Any discussion on this matter?
Thank you. This is Rob. I visited the site today, and there's numerous other cell towers in that same area. And I don't think this is going to be any higher than the mountain. The mountain's way up there. So you might be able to see it from the road, but I don't think it's going to be an eyesore.
Thank you. I'll just add to that too, and kind of going off what Mr. Pelham said earlier, this is the first windmill I've been made aware of. However, we've had the water towers and everything else, and I personally do like the disguised look other than just a mono pole sitting up there. And you know, some of the others tend to blend in a little bit better with the surrounding areas. So, you know, I'm not adverse to having it look like something other than a big stick sitting up there with a bunch of panels on it. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Rob. I'll make a motion. I move that after giving reasonable consideration, the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 22-0028 for Summit Christian Church, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and all 3 findings in accordance with Section 110.324.75, subject to the conditions contained in Exhibit A of the staff report, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, no effects on the military installation, and A through C on the findings.
Thank you. Second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Yeah. Please.
We'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and we'll then hear the next item.
Recording.
Next item on the agenda is special use permit case number WSUP 23-0011, the Turkey Meadows Fire Protection District, Washoe Valley. I believe we have Mr. Bronsik, who's
Chris Bronzik, Washington County Planning. We are looking at WSUP 23-0011. This is the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, Washoe Valley Station. This is located off of White Pelican Road and US 395. It's for the development of a safety services civic use type, a fire station within the low-density suburban regulatory zone. This regulatory zone requires that safety services use type come before a board for a special use permit. As of right now, this proposal is going to be part of a 6-parcel proposal. However, the applicants did submit a reversion to acreage and a deed of combination, which is intended to combine all 6 parcels into one 5.9 acre parcel. And as part of that request, it is going to relinquish emergency access easements, water line easements, public utility easements, as well as reciprocal access easements, which were ultimately created by parcel map number 5290. This proposed fire station will instead access directly off of US 395 instead of that White Pelican road. The proposal is a single-story, 11,700 square foot building. It includes an apparatus bay with front and back aprons, as well as crew quarters for 6 fire crew and 2 large storage buildings. There will also be employee parking, public parking, as well as ADA parking spaces associated with this development. The apparatus bay is designed to accommodate 3 large firefighting vehicles and an ambulance. And it does call for potential expansion of an additional bay to allow for 1 additional firefighting vehicle. The exterior of the structure will be concrete masonry units, so CMU. And I provided a site plan roughly showing what the proposal will be, with the primary building in the center around that wraparound apron and the 2 proposed storage buildings to the east and south. Above is the elevations that were submitted as part of the application on all 4 sides, north, south, east, west. The apparatus bay doors do have glass components. They will be treated in a way to reduce reflection and increase site visibility. As part of this request, there is some grading associated with it. It includes 900 cubic yards of cut, 2,000 cubic yards of import, and about 87,400 square foot of disturbed area. At the end of all this grading and project, most of that disturbed area will be covered with buildings, parking, and pavement. There is no slopes that are proposed as part of this project that are greater than 3:1, and no retaining walls are proposed. This was noticed to 53 property owners, unique property owners, and 68 total parcels. The applicant did hold a meeting on February 27th of this year at the Pleasant Valley Elementary School. No virtual meeting was provided as part of this neighborhood meeting. However, we did note that there were 2 members of the public that were present. There was a 20-minute presentation that was provided. And within that application, the public that was present was noted to be generally in favor of the project. There are required findings: consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, as well as the effect on a military installation, as well as 2 South Valley's area plan findings, which also include that maintaining the character statement or conserving it through mitigation, as well as no significant degradation of air quality will occur with the approval of this permit. Staff is recommending approval with conditions, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from staff? Chris, I have a couple for you. Can you clarify what generally in favor project means?
So the language that was provided within those sign-in sheets for the neighborhood meeting simply said, simply in favor. So I think I would divert that to the applicants or their representative.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, I noticed when you noticed the various agencies for their input, you did notify NDOT, but they do not respond in any way. Do you happen to know, I don't know if you're going to answer this or someone else, but are they going to have flashing lights or any type of signal since they're going to be exiting directly onto 395 to alert the traffic there?
There will be alerts, a signal, but I think that would be a more technical question that's better asked from our applicant.
Thank you. Well, they now know what I'm going to ask them. All right, is there any further questions for staff?
Yes, I do.
Julian.
Is that condition it is conditioned as condition K? To have the advanced active warning system on Highway 395. Okay, thank you.
Correct. The reason I'm referring to the applicant to answer that is I simply don't know if it's hanging over the roadway or if it's on the sides.
Okay. Now, in that condition, that was put in as a condition, was that for your request or someone else's request?
That was part of one of the documents that was submitted, recommended that. And so the applicant was volunteering that as installation, and staff just memorialized that as a condition.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is the applicant present and wish to come up and clarify a couple points for us?
Good afternoon. Chair Thomas, board members, Stacy Huggins with Wood Rogers for the record, representing Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District in this special use permit. I do have a presentation, but maybe just very quickly, in terms of the neighborhood meeting, the 2 attendees at that meeting were in favor and were anxious to see this fire station built. Generally was kind of an all-encompassing term, but they were in favor and excited to see this move forward. Then also in terms of the flashing lights, the fire district wanted lights on 395, and so they offered them, and NDOT has accepted them. We actually have a letter that NDOT sent to our traffic engineer confirming their acceptance of those lights on 395. So the lights, the emergency activated signals on 395 were a fire request, and the NDOT has accepted and approved them.
Before you do your presentation, is it possible that we can get a copy of that letter or staff can have a copy of that letter?
We can absolutely share a copy with staff.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.
Was there another question that I forgot?
Don't believe so, not at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Then I will go through my presentation. Chris did a great job covering the project. I just have a couple little bits of maybe background information and some more detail on the project. And just to be clear, if you have specific questions about any of this, we have a team here. The fire chief is here if you have questions about the fire stations or the history. And then our engineering and our architect is here too. So going forward, so the new station is really intended to address two aging stations that are in Washoe Valley right now. You are probably familiar with Station 30, that's out near Bowers Mansion. It was constructed in 1950 to serve as a snowplow and sand facility. That was closed in 2020 due to the age of the building and also pest infestation. So that station is no longer operable for Truckee Meadows Fire. On the other side of Washoe Valley is the East Lake Station, Station 32. That is still an active station. It was constructed in 1979. It's a 3-apparatus bay station with crew quarters. So the intention with this new station, which is kind of centrally located between that Bowers Mansion site and the East Washoe Valley site, is to combine those two stations in a location that's centrally located to respond to the types of calls that are typically needed in Washoe Valley. It will also allow the district to build a new, more modern station in place of those two, again, aging and older stations. As you can see on that graphic there, right now it is 6 parcels, as Chris mentioned. Those 6 parcels are going through a reversion to acreage. We are in the process of getting the map signed. That map will be signed, and those maps or those parcels will be reverted, I would expect within 4 to 6 weeks, probably. Just a little bit zoomed in view so you can see what the parcels actually look like today. Again, 6 parcels surrounded by a mix of residential and non-residential uses. Across the street to the north, you have non-residential uses, as well as the property immediately adjacent to the east is also non-residential. The properties to the south and southwest are residential uses that have been there for a while. And then along the western edge of the 6 parcels is a segment of Browns Creek drainage, where you can see all of those existing trees. The site plan intentionally stayed out of that western portion of the property in order to preserve all of those trees and stay out of that drainage way. Excuse me, so as part of that effort to protect and preserve those trees and stay out of the drainage way, not only are we asking for the special use permit for the fire station, but we are asking for modification to the screening along that western property line, because the screening would have required us to put in a new fence along that property line where there is already an existing fence and several existing very mature trees. And we did not want to go over there and change anything to do with that drainage or the existing trees in that area. So looking at the actual design of the site, you can see here again on that western or the left edge of the site plan, that is all of the Browns Creek drainage untouched. That's the proposed development area for the fire station is approximately 115 feet from that western property line. So we've given quite a bit of buffer and distance between those two uses. The fire station has been sited to have all of the access out onto 395 with the circulation coming in off of 395. Vehicles will route around to the back or the southern side where they will then pull into the apparatus bays and then be ready to pull back out when they have to go out on a call. There will be no access to Lake Drive to the south. As Chris mentioned, this is an 11,700 square foot fire station with apparatus bay for 3 fire trucks and an ambulance, and the potential to someday expand up to 4. That gray area that you see on the left side right here sorry for those of you that can't see it on your screen, could someday be that fourth apparatus bay. The inside of the building has been designed to accommodate a 6-man crew. There are ancillary buildings around the exterior for equipment that the fire district may need to have on site. We have 27 parking stalls on this site. That comes as a result of needing 1 parking space per employee at peak shift. So we have to have at a minimum 12 because there's an overlap in staff at some points. And then we also provided some guest parking on the chance that the general public wants to come to this fire station for a tour or some other purpose. So there's more than adequate guest parking on this site. Any lighting, while there's very little planned for this, will meet any dark sky requirements. There are pole lights in the parking areas. They're 12 feet tall, and they are all designed with shields to make sure the lights go down to meet those dark sky requirements out in Washoe Valley. Excuse me. The project, as it's shown here and designed, includes 13,440 square feet of landscaping, primarily around the south eastern edge, if you will, where it's adjacent to the existing residential. You can see there the note open view fencing with 1 tree per 20 feet. There's approximately 29 trees along that edge to mitigate for the impact of the fire station to those adjacent residential uses. I mentioned earlier about the existing 6-foot wooden fence and the mature landscaping along the west edge, so we're not proposing any new trees on that side. The open view fencing that we are proposing is something that's noted in the South Valley's area plan. So that's why we have proposed that along that south boundary. That is in accordance with the area plan. We believe it's better for that area in general than a solid wooden fence along those boundaries. In terms of the traffic, we did have a traffic study done. The traffic study noted that the fire station would have approximately 60 average daily trips, just based primarily on employees, with 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. peak trips, unless, of course, they're going out on a call, and then those numbers may vary, but we don't look at it in that environment. There was no significant impact, and as we discussed earlier, there is an advanced active warning signal to be installed on 395, and I do believe there's a condition in the staff report that further requires that to be provided. This site will connect to Tumwa water mains that are nearby, and it includes on-site septic system, which are those 2 very square boxes on the south side of the site plan there. Chris showed you the architecture. I will just quickly run through these. Again, it's a single-story structure, concrete masonry buildings with accents to meet kind of the character of the area. And I do want to just preface that these are kind of conceptual, and while we really plan to build something that looks, like this, I do want to just make it clear that markets and costs and all of those things could change some of these elements, but in general, it's going to be something similar to this that you see here. Those apparatus bay doors, as you see there, are designed right now as a bifold door, so they open across instead of up. It's kind of a new feature that the fire district is looking at, but it's something that they would really like to try to make work on this site. This is the south elevation, so this would be the back, if you will, where the trucks will pull in before they're ready to leave. And then this would be the east and the west, so both sides of the site. I included the floor plan in here. If you have questions about it, as I said, our architect is here. He would be happy to talk through what is actually happening inside of the building if you are curious about how the floor plan works out. That summarizes our project. I am happy to answer any questions for you about this fire station. As I said, the fire chief is here if you have specific questions for him or anyone else on our team.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Gershon.
Peter Gishon for the record. Given the residential adjacency, with things like lighting, noise, landscaping, are you meeting code minimum, or are you doing something beyond that to try to mitigate, given residential all around you?
Would you mind bringing my presentation back up? While she's bringing up my presentation, we are meeting code. We felt like in order to kind of maintain the character of the area, adding, let's see if I can get to the site plan. I can get there. Do you mind going to the color site plan? Adding too many trees around the edges would kind of skew the character of the overall area, particularly since we have all the trees along the west edge where there's already existing, where the existing residential is. So you can see there's all those trees there where the fire station, that property to the west would be the most impacted based on where the fire station site has been sited. The building to the east is commercial. And we don't anticipate a lot of activity on that side. Right? The fire trucks coming out on the west side would definitely have the most impact to that property to the west. There are close to 30 trees on that western edge. So we didn't feel like we needed to provide more trees there. And then along that southwest, southeast, south corner, we did provide trees along that edge. As I said, there's 30 trees on that edge clustered to make sure that we're mitigating for the noise, but that's quite a distance from that existing residential. And the lighting is really primarily building lighting, again, with some pole lighting in the parking lots, but not anywhere else except the parking lots.
But for those along that southerly border, there will be lights that could be theoretically seen from someone's master bedroom?
I think with the exception of the one parking lot on the south side, excuse me, I could point to it here. I don't know if you can see it. This parking area right here, with the exception of that parking lot, this parking lot could have a pole here, this could have a pole and a pole. I don't think, aside of a building light that might be triggered by movement, I do not believe that there will be lights that impact those properties. Also, they will have shields to help make sure that light is going down. Of course, someone in their bedroom could see the light from the building when it comes on. If you would prefer to not have a light pole on that parking lot, I think we could come up with another option. We could look at a lower bollard type lighting back there if that was really a concern.
And then from NDOT's perspective, any improvements to 395 beyond the emergency lighting?
No, we did work with NDOT. There was a deviation letter that they provided because of the different approach so the driveway is a slightly different design than they would normally want onto that highway. But they provided a letter approving this design out onto the highway. Other than that, they did not ask for any other improvements onto Old 395.
No decel lanes or anything?
In fact, they did not ask for the activated lights. As I mentioned earlier, the fire district offered them because it was important to the district.
That's all, thanks.
Sure.
Maybe as a point of clarification as to the lighting out there in the parking lot, you're going to comply with dark sky, as you said in your presentation. So it should really limit any type of spillover in the community. Thank you for that.
And just a follow-up, can we assume that all of the green trees we see in this diagram are indicative of what you are going to be planting in the plan?
Yes.
Or in the program?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next we'll call for public comment. Madam Secretary, is there any public?
Mr. Chairman, before we begin on public comment, I want to inform the board, due to a technical issue, I was informed by staff that there was, coming back from the break, during Chris's presentation, in chambers was muted, but closed captions were on. That has been fixed, and I believe only Mr. Brosnick's presentation was omitted and not being able to be heard by the people on Zoom. So if there are people on Zoom who could not hear that presentation, I would have some patience in regard to letting them clarify with Mr. Brosnick if there's any of that public comment.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Madam Secretary, is there any public wishing to speak on this matter?
I have no public comment in chambers and no hands raised via Zoom.
Just give everybody a second or two just in case. No change?
No change.
Thank you very much. We will close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this matter?
This is Rob. I think this is a pretty straightforward project, and I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Any other comment? With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. Go ahead.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 23-0011 for the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, with the conditions including as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and South Valley's Area Plan Policy SV.2.16 and SV.18.3, consisting of consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance non-detrimental, effect on a military installation, and required South Valley's Area Plan findings, SV.2.16 and SV.18.3.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Rob. I'll second it.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Next item up on the agenda is WSUP 23-0012, the United Site Services Storage Yard. And I believe it's Mr. Pelham that's going to address this.
This is your last presentation of your career?
Oh, my goodness. How lucky are we?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Roger Pelham, Senior Planner, Washoe County Planning, and indeed this may very well be, in fact, this is my very last presentation as an employee of Washoe County. This afternoon, we're considering special use permit case number WSUP 23-0012 for United Site Services. This is a special use permit to legalize the prior construction and operation of a facility that has several uses, including storage of operable vehicles, wholesale storage and distribution heavy, and general industrial heavy use types. The applicant also requested to eliminate all generally applicable paving standards, landscape standards, screening standards, lighting standards, and the requirement for commercial uses to operate from a commercial structure. The facility is located about 6 miles north of Gerlach, as shown here, there on County Road 34. This photo shows in the foreground the existing facility. You can see there's there's a surrounding fence. The white area that's sort of to the middle left, sort of in front of the playa, are the tops of a bunch of porta potties. those white tops on top there. And you're sort of looking southerly, and if you look to the far right-hand side of this, you can kind of see some little black dots. That's actually the buildings in the town of Gerlach. Here we have some photos of the existing facility. This is inside of the screening fence that was constructed. Here are a number of those porta potties that we discussed a moment ago. Number of mobile buildings of various types. Here we have a site plan. You can see the parcel itself, it incorporates area on both sides of State Route 34. There's a driveway going in, and then the facility itself is inside that dotted line. Here you have a close-up, and this is proposed, of course, because the various items that are called out in these various locations, that's not the way it is now. Right now, there are no driveways. It's just sort of the items are just placed inside the screening fence. Under most circumstances, we couldn't even consider the types of special use permits that we're looking at today. The high desert area plan, however, is unique in that it allows uses that are far more intense than would otherwise be allowed within the general rural regulatory zone. Generally speaking, the GR zone is meant for one single family dwelling, associated barns and outbuildings, and things like agriculture or livestock. High desert area plan is different. Because of the remote nature of the area, far more intense uses are in fact allowed. However, to balance that, the area plan also calls for mitigation of the additional impacts that may be created by that type of equipment, that type of facility, rather. There are calls for preservation of the community character. We have to make sure there's no detrimental impact on the air quality. We also call for use of drought-tolerant plants. All of those items have been addressed in the proposed conditions of approval. I am recommending approval, but I will say that the set of conditions of approval are fairly stringent because of the nature of the facility itself. Generally speaking, what we're asking for are the same standards to be applied to this commercial and industrial operation as would be applied to any other. The reason those standards exist are to mitigate the impacts. So let me go through each of the requests that have been made by the applicant, and I'll sort of address each one in turn. They asked to eliminate the requirement for a commercial structure. Again, this is a commercial and industrial facility. While most people, that is to say the majority of the folks that would be there on site, would be during a relatively limited time period, essentially leading up to and following the Burning Man event, this is essentially what this is going to be used for. There's nothing limiting that. They could do other things through the remainder of the year. And during that time when that rather intense use goes on, well, obviously they do need a building, and we do need things like toilets. Pardon, but those are needed when you've got lots of folks around. They've asked to eliminate landscaping and screening. Well, I don't believe that that's appropriate. There are other areas with clumps of trees. It's not uncommon. Usually those clumps of trees in the high desert are around areas that have water or around traditional ranch houses, those sorts of things. And if we add those sorts of trees around this area, well, then that creates compatibility. It makes it similar to other things that are in the area. The other thing that it does, and this is very, very important, is it's going to help screen and mitigate the view from Highway 34, sort of looking to the south, looking to the sort of the southeast more or less from the highway down onto that facility. That facility is a fair amount lower. I say, 30, 40 feet lower in elevation than the highway is at that point. And The applicant also asked to eliminate paved driveways, paved parking, all those sorts of things. And I can certainly understand why it would seem, at first blush, to be perhaps out of character to require that in an area where many uses don't have paved driveways and parking areas and those sorts of things. But in this case, it is my opinion that the intensity of the use warrants those kinds of standards. And pavement is really important for more than just the ease of travel. Pavement also helps contain any petrochemicals that may drop out of cars and that sort of thing. And it actually helps to protect the environment. It also helps to keep the dust down. Again, going back to those required considerations for the high desert area plan. Now, each of these is dealt with in a little more detail in the staff report. So the elimination of the office is dealt with in pages 12 and 13. And again, I think generally applicable code is appropriate. Likewise with landscaping, I think we, though, can perhaps look at a little bit of a modification here. Do we need shrubs in that area? No, it's going to be relatively low. They're going to be relatively far away from most of the public. The trees certainly, while growing vertically, are going to provide some level of screening. The shrubs probably won't. More appropriate, in my opinion, is that we simply revegetate all of those disturbed areas, and I have some conditions included with your recommendation to require irrigation of those areas. In my experience, revegetation really doesn't work unless you put irrigation on it, at least for a certain time period. We've done this many times. Usually it's 3 years or until 70% vegetation compared to the adjacent undisturbed areas. Again, the elimination of pavement, more than one use there, it's easier, it keeps the dust down, and it, again, protects the environment from petrochemicals. It is my opinion that the required findings of fact can be made when the appropriate conditions of approval are imposed. Without those appropriate conditions of approval, I would have a very difficult time recommending approval. These are all included at Exhibit A. I could go down through each one of these. If you have any questions on any particular condition, perhaps we can save that to the end, but in the interest of brevity, I think it can be consistent. Again, the general rural zone in the high desert area allows for these kinds of things under certain circumstances. The improvements necessary have been included with the recommended conditions. Is the site suitable? Yes, with certain screening. I think that condition can be, that finding can probably be made. Issuance not detrimental, I think that's, again, based on mitigation of the impacts associated with the proposed commercial and industrial uses, I think it can. I don't know what I just did. Can you turn that back on for me, please? Thank you. There is no military installation in the area, and I believe that with the conditions of approval as recommended in your staff report, that we have addressed the relevant policies within the high desert area plan. So with that, I am recommending approval, and I am available for any questions that you may have. I do have a slight change to the proposed motion, just adding that one sentence right there at the end, making it clear that the additional finding community character can be adequately preserved. And again, with that, I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pelham. Is there questions? Ms. Julian, yes.
Just more comment. I want to congratulate you on an excellent staff report, and I thought the conditioning was especially of note, and so I thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff? Yes, sir. Mr. Grisham.
Peter Gishon for the record. What do you think of their proposal to utilize a portable office building with potable water tanks and gray and black water tanks, given that they're in the business, that they should presumably be able to maintain that adequately.
The nature of the facility is permanent year-round. It is therefore my opinion that the office should also be permanent year-round. Certainly, the idea of using water tanks, I think, is problematic substantially because they will need to irrigate that landscaping year-round. And, you know, what if more gets used in a certain time period, perhaps, than they would anticipate? Again, given the nature and intensity, I tend to think that that's a poor idea. Now, that's not to say that they can't use a commercial coach. You can put a pre-manufactured structure there. But to not have connection to a permanent water source and a septic source and electricity, that would probably put this applicant in a situation that is dissimilar to other applicants who are similarly situated. One example I would cite would be what was called the Copart sublot. It was a very similar type of thing we approved a couple of years ago. Very, very similar conditions of approval. They asked to get rid of the building, but the reason for that was they had their primary lot 2 or 3 miles away, at which they had all of these permanent facilities. So that was approved. We don't have that alternative facility available to us in this case.
And it looks like the applicant is not the property owner?
That is correct. And that's not at all uncommon.
And do you know if there's a long-term lease in place? Is it year to year?
I have no idea. I would refer that to the applicant or their representative.
Thank you, Roger. Just, I believe for my own edification, isn't Highway 34, isn't there some talk about actually making that a scenic byway also, I believe?
Actually, during the, we had a public meeting up in Gerlach for a different issue for the master plan that you'll all be seeing here in the coming months. And one of the things that was discussed during that public meeting is that there is an effort by a group there in the Gerlach area to have Highway 34 designated as a scenic byway. Yes. Now, that hasn't happened yet, so we can't really sort of use that as part of our evaluation.
Sure, but it just gives us a broader sense of everything that goes on out there. But
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Ms. Julian.
Kathy Julian for the record. I'm looking on page 37 where one of the members of the public wrote in asking why can't we take a broader view of all of the various storage areas because they appear to be getting area by area approvals. And they also mentioned that, so they ask how can this be accomplished, that this broader view? And I suppose I asked staff as well as staff on that issue.
Thank you for the question. Give me a moment to compose my response. I am speculating to a certain extent, but we have our area plans and we have our master plan, and that is being rewritten as we speak now. Yesterday at the Planning Commission, some of my colleagues presented some questions on how the Planning Commission wants to be involved in the public outreach that's going to be going on this summer, right now. I mean, this is going on. And it is certainly possible that if this comes up in those folks in the north, in the high desert area plan, that they could certainly include some standards in that area plan policies regarding this type of use by itself. To the best of my knowledge, that hasn't occurred. I think to be safe, it is probably better to consider only the application that we're looking at today as a development in and of itself, and broader policy questions perhaps addressed by other bodies who in fact have that duty.
I would add, Mr. Chairman, Michael Large for the record, I would also add that in regard to that, it's a very good point that she brings up in her comment. However, you also have to look at the intent and purpose of the people who own the property. They're the ones that get to decide whether they want to have a storage unit or what they want to do with that certain property. Grouping storage facilities may be a very good idea from a resident of Gerlach's perspective, but each individual owner of the property gets to decide what they're going to do with it. We've seen properties come in from that area, from ORMAT or from the BLM or other areas that want to do different things with their property. Simply grouping it based on a request for that we group all of the storage in one spot isn't necessarily feasible and workable from the county's viewpoint.
Thank you, Mr. Large. Go ahead, Ms. Julian.
One more, Kathy Julian, for the record. One more question. Where in the conditions do you deal with the dark sky issues? Which condition is that?
I don't believe I included that as a condition. That's standard code requirement.
Okay, would it be appropriate in this case to include it with, one concern was, I think in condition S, it references the parking area for the permanent commercial building shall comply with all applicable standards, and it includes noise and lighting. What about not just the parking area, but the area where other things are stored? And is it potentially possible that they could have multiple lights shining on these things to avoid theft or whatever?
It's really not. It's really not. Code requires that lighting be shielded and downcast. Being a commercial and industrial use, part of the building permit application will be what we call a photometric study, and that has little numbers that sort of come out from each of the light standards and show how far it goes, and those must stop at the property lines. You can have no spillover at the property line. I don't suppose it does any harm to add it, but it certainly doesn't add anything either.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hey, Roger, this is Rob. Is there power at the site?
I don't know. I will leave that up to the applicant to address.
Are there any further questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Pelham, and wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is the applicant present and wish to speak on this matter?
Sure. Good afternoon. For the record, Mike Raley with Christie Corporation, representing United Site Services. We have reviewed all the conditions with Roger. We are in agreement with the conditions as presented in the staff report, so we concur with the staff report. To address a couple of the questions that came up, first regarding the lease, it's my understanding it's on a year-to-year lease now. As part of the special use permit process, United Site Services will go back and negotiate with the property owner. Obviously, those improvements are going to require a longer-term commitment, I would assume. So there are some other options within kind of the developed area of Gerlach itself that they're considering. But if they do move forward with this special use permit, that will be a longer-term lease through an agreement with the property owner. As far as the power, all power out there is either generator or solar. So lighting is going to definitely be kept to a minimum. For a variety of reasons. There's not really any activity there at night. It would just be for any kind of security purposes. But given the remote location, I don't think that's as big of a concern as it would be if it was, here in Reynolds Parks. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you. And are there any questions for this gentleman? Mr. Grishon, you look like you're ready to push the
Yeah, Peter Grishon for the record. So just to be clear, the application offered a variety of alternatives, but you're now agreeing with all staff recommendations?
I mean, certainly we would like to avoid the paving and the building, that sort of thing, but in discussing it with Roger, I think the county, the code, as it was explained to us, is really not a lot of options in terms of staff recommending approval with that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Julian?
Kathy Julian, for the record. It's mentioned in here that you'll be dumping some of the, I guess, perhaps oil or sewage or whatever out of these various buildings and porta potties that you have there outside this area, then bringing these items into the storage area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And those items will be placed on asphalted area, not dirt?
It'd be asphalt or an acceptable all-weather surface. That would be something that would be dealt with at the time of building permit. But the way that it works, for example, those porta potties that are out there, those are moved out to the Burning Man event. They're pumped. Those trucks then come back into Reno Sparks. United Site Services has contracts with the sewer plant. That's where those are emptied, and so everything is brought back empty. They're not actively doing it on site.
Thank you. Any further questions for this gentleman? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, is there any public comment on this matter?
No public comment in chambers, but I do have a hand raised via Zoom. Christy, if you could please unmute and state your first and last name for the record.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Evans. I am a resident of Gerlach. I am also the person who submitted the letter that was referenced. I just want to say, for the board's understanding of this, I definitely support individual property owners being able to make money. And I certainly appreciate Roger's recommendations. With this project, of course, we can see what it looks like since it's already built. And I can tell you it is visible from 34. So I certainly hope that the board will include a condition that trees be put along that fence line so that hopefully we don't have to see all the porta potties year round. And I just want to make the point that we are seeing an increase in storage lots in our area for the Burning Man event, which I would argue is not in keeping with the character. And our character primarily in that area is vast open expanses. We hope to increase some level of tourism for those open spaces, and seeing one storage lot after another is not something that I think many of us hope to see in large scale. So thank you, Roger, for all your work, and for the board, and that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further comments?
No further public comment.
Thank you. Mr. Pelham, I believe you did include the condition with trees out there.
Mr. Chair, yes.
Thank you.
May I seek, Kathy Julian, for the record, if I may seek clarification on that? Does that include along Highway, I see in condition K, along Highway 34, or is it, it says around northern, southern, and western perimeter of the project site, but is that what she's referring to from Highway 34 and blocking the view?
Yes. To the member through the chair. Yes. Essentially, the three sides that you might be able to see from 34 are going to have trees around them. The only side that doesn't is the one facing the playa.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, Madam Secretary, any other comments from the public?
No further public comment.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will go ahead and entertain a motion. I think there should be consideration given. I believe Mr. Pelham added a sentence, if we can put that back up on the board to consider when motion is made.
It'll be there in just a moment.
There we go. That is up there on the screen, should you wish to or would like to include that in the motion. Anyway, I will entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Rob, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I move that after given reasoned consideration, information contained in staff report, and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions special use permit case number WSUP 23-0012 for United Site Services to allow the legal establishment of a facility for storage of operable vehicles, wholesale storage and distribution, heavy and general industrial, heavy use types, and to allow the use of compacted road-based materials for the storage area only, and to eliminate the required shrubs in the required landscape area, subject to all other general applicable requirements of the development and code, including but not limited to all the paving standards, all the landscaping standards, screening standards, lighting standards, and requirements for commercial use to operate from a commercial structure, with the conditions included in Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30, and the additional findings that the community character can be adequately preserved, consistency, improvement, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and no effects on a military installation in compliance with area plan.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Grisham. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to chair and board items. First item on the agenda is evidently nomination and approval of the Washoe County Board of Adjustment Chair and Vice Chair among the Board of Adjustment members. My time is up. So we will bring it to the board. Does anyone have, anyone wish to make a nomination or a motion? I will, I'll step forward then, and if it's okay with the board members, I would like to nominate Mr. Pierce as he's currently the vice chair, and I'd like to recommend him to take over the chair position for the next year. So that'll be my motion. I'll make a motion that Mr. Pierce be nominated and approved as the chair of the board of the upcoming Board of Adjustment. Thank you, Ms. Julian. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. And second to that is we now need a vice chair, and I will open that up to the board for discussion. Is there any recommendations on that? Ms. Julian?
I move that we nominate Don Christensen to the vice chair position.
Thank you. I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Welcome aboard. Congratulations. All right. Good. Next thing is future agenda items, non-action items. Let me, before we get go too far down into this area here, two things I would like to just present as the outgoing chair is, first of all, I'd like to welcome aboard Peter Grisham to the board. Glad to have you, and looking forward to all the insights you will have in the future for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In addition to that, I also want to take a moment of the board's time, and I would like to not only personally congratulate Roger Pelham, but I also, on behalf of the board, for all the service that you have done for us over the years. I've worked with you for about 10 years now, and it's always been a pleasure to see you come forward and present to this board. You've been very professional, succinct, on point. You have handled, you've managed to handle the board members at times very nicely, and it's greatly appreciated, and your insight is greatly appreciated, and you will be definitely missed. So thank you, Roger. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
This is Rob. I'd like to ditto that and say, Roger, it's been an honor and a privilege to work with you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all your help and all the boards. and everything that I'm on, and you're definitely going to be a hard shoe to fill.
Thank you very much.
Yes, definitely, without a doubt. With that, future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items they would like to present at this time? Seeing none, thank you. How about requests for information from staff? This is a non-action item. Are there any requests for information from staff? Ms. Julian.
Kathy Julian for the record. If I could request that it would be helpful in the staff reports to have a link to any neighborhood meeting recording mentioned there. And that way, if we're interested in hearing what was actually said, then it makes it easier, and the public will have access to that as well, more easily. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Director and Legal Counsel items. Report on previous Board of Adjustment items. Mr. Pelham.
Mr. Chair, I have no report on your previous items. I would, however, like to take just a moment of the board's time as well for two items. The first item is I would like to introduce Tim Evans. Tim is our new planner. He has taken this position as of Monday, and he comes to us with several years of planning experience. I have spent the last couple of days with him, and I am confident that he is going to be up to speed very, very quickly, and you can certainly look forward to seeing him presenting in front of you just in the upcoming months. And then finally, I will express my personal thanks to each of you. This is my very last public hearing. I've been doing this for a long time now, a couple of decades and then some. I've perhaps presented thousands of projects. I don't know. I'd have to go do math. But I would like to express my thanks to you because you're up here volunteering, truly trying to make your community a better place. And I said this last night, if I did not truly believe that we were really giving it our best to make this a better community, I just don't know that I could have done this job all these years. And I appreciate each of your service.
Thank you, Roger. That was very nice. And like I said, you will be missed, that's for sure. So, legal information and updates. Tough act to follow there, Mr. Large, but
Nothing for legal, and legal's never made the world a better place.
thank you very much. Last up is public comment. Madam Secretary, do we have anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time?
There is no public comment in chambers or via Zoom.
Thank you. We are adjourned.